Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of silks and shackles, gilded crowns, and silent screams, the Middle Ages, where being queen wasn't the fairy tale it's made out to be. Picture this, you're perched on a high-backed throne, jeweled robes pooling around your feet, a crown heavy with gems pressing into your scalp. But outside that stained glass window, the world doesn't kneel in awe. It waits. It watches. And it whispers about you behind stone walls and velvet curtains. Your every move is judged, every breath observed. And despite the illusion of luxury, you're a prisoner just in better clothes. You don't rule the kingdom. You survive it. Most days you probably won't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You weren't born royal. Few queens were. You began as a daughter, valuable, yes, but only in the way a prized horse or a diplomatic letter might be. Something to be traded. Your family spent your childhood preparing you for marriage. Not love, not choice, just strategy. You learned to read not for pleasure, but so you could sign documents and spot forgeries. You learned how to dance not for joy, but to be presentable. You learned languages because your future husband might not speak your tongue, and he certainly wouldn't care to learn it. By 12, your body was scrutinized for childbearing potential. Older ladies, nurses, midwives, your mother prodded and whispered, concerned about your hips, your blood, your ability to bleed at the right time and stop bleeding at the right time. You didn't understand half of what they meant. Not yet. You were still playing with carved ivory dolls, still practicing embroidery in your solar under candlelight, still peeking out at the nights with shy curiosity. But that didn't matter. You were a political pawn. When the marriage contract was signed, you became a gift, sent with chests of silver bolts of silk, maybe a few servants or an exotic pet. You rode away from everything you knew often, to a strange land where your accent marked you, your manners betrayed you, and the servants whispered that you weren't one of them. And then the wedding night. No, you don't get privacy. A queen's virginity is state business. Witnesses might wait outside the chamber. Blood-stained sheets would be paraded through the castle like war banners if the sheets didn't show proof you were questioned. Not him, you, because failure to bleed meant failure to be pure. And that meant your entire marriage contract could be voided. And that meant your homeland could lose its alliance. And that meant war. Imagine lying under heavy brocade blankets, a stranger beside you, someone older, colder, often drunk, maybe kind, maybe cruel. You close your eyes. Try not to cry. You try to remember the sound of your mother's voice, your father's laugh, the scent of your old room. But all of that is gone. You're someone's wife now. And soon, if fate allows, you'll be someone's mother. Pregnancy doesn't come gently in the Middle Ages. There's no prenatal yoga, no midwife doulas with essential oils. There are leeches and herbs and prayers. You're told to avoid bright colors, to eat soft cheese but not too much, to sleep on your left side, to wear amulets made from bone or saint's teeth. You listen. You obey. Because if you die in childbirth, and you probably will, they'll replace you, quietly, swiftly, as if you never wore the crown. And that crown, it doesn't come with power, not real power. You don't pass laws, you don't ride into battle. You host banquets. You smile through backhanded compliments from visiting nobles. You pretend not to hear the rumors about your husband's lovers. Sometimes men, sometimes girls too young to know what a kiss really means. You keep a household. You produce heirs. You write letters to your siblings back home, letters that are read by others before being sent, every word weighed for treason. And when you do speak your mind, they call you difficult, or mad, or worse, a witch. Sometimes you retreat to a convent to escape court politics. But even the nunnery isn't safe. Queens who grow too powerful, too clever, too vocal, they get sent away under the guise of holiness, silenced in stone cells with nothing but psalms and regret. Or maybe your story is darker still. Maybe the king dies. Suddenly, suspiciously, and eyes turn to you. They say your tears are too dry, that you smiled at the funeral feast, that you spoke to your steward too softly, too sweetly. Suddenly, you're not a widow. You're a suspect. Your steps are watched. Your letters intercepted. You're told to stay in your rooms. Candles burn low into the night, while courtiers whisper outside your door. You know they're debating what to do with you. A former queen is dangerous, especially one who still breathes. And sometimes you make it through. You raise a son, he takes the throne. You become queen mother. But don't let the title fool you, it's no safeguard. If he marries a clever woman, you're seen as a threat. If you try to guide him, you're called overbearing. If you say nothing, they say you're plotting. You drink a little more wine. Sit a little longer by the fire. Pretend not to hear the plans made behind your back. You remember the girl you used to be, the one who embroidered birds into silk, who whispered to kittens and memorized poems. She's long gone. The mirror doesn't lie. Your eyes are tired. Your shoulders slouch. The weight of the crown was never just metal, it was duty, silence, and endless performance. And now at the edge of your life, you realize something strange. You were queen, but you were never free. The morning after your coronation is colder than you expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. You thought it might feel magical, waking up draped in royal silks, the taste of ceremony still lingering on your tongue. But instead, it's eerily quiet. Your ladies-in-waiting enter your chamber in practiced silence, their heads bowed, their eyes cautious. No one congratulates you. No one smiles like they mean it. You're not the girl with a crown anymore, you're the queen with expectations. And expectations here are a blade that cuts both ways. Your first meal of the day is served in golden dishes, but your appetite is gone. You've learned not to trust food that comes from unfamiliar kitchens. Queens have been poisoned with less cause than you. A cup of spiced wine, you hold it for hours without sipping. Every bite is a gamble. Every servant, no matter how loyal, might carry a grudge or follow someone else's orders. It's not just your meals under scrutiny. Your body becomes a symbol of the kingdom's strength. If you fall ill, it's seen as an omen. If you gain weight, they whisper about gluttony or secret pregnancies. If you lose weight, they speak of curses, infertility, or worse, a troubled conscience. A queen must be flawless, untouchable, timeless. But you are human, and every flaw is a rumor waiting to grow teeth. At court, the air is thick with subtle cruelty. You quickly learn to read the language of raised eyebrows and polite insults. Oh, that gown, how brave. Isn't that shade a bit modern, such an unusual choice for someone of your stature? They smile when they say these things. They bow. but their words land like slaps against your skin. You can't slap back, so instead you learn to wield silence like a sword. You answer with looks, with perfectly timed turns of the head, with a sudden drop of your spoon. You surround yourself with women cleverer than they look, nobles who know how to eavesdrop and dress it as embroidery. You learn which courtiers are desperate, which can be bought, and which are simply bored and dangerous. Because boredom in a royal court is deadly. When nobles get bored, they play games, and sometimes you are the game. Then comes the matter of the royal heir. There's no escape from it. Every look at your midsection, every offhand comment about names or cradles or stars, aligning it all, weighs on you. You are expected to conceive, quickly, publicly. If months pass without signs, you begin to feel the pressure in every corner of your body. Midwives prod your stomach with cold hands and colder eyes. Priests offer blessings and subtle accusations. Your husband, if he notices at all, might take mistresses with more luck. And everyone knows about them. The mistresses. They parade through the court like shimmering ghosts, draped in perfume and smugness. Some are quiet and cruel. Others pretend to be your friend. They compliment your hair, lend you a ring. One might even offer you advice on how he likes things. You smile, of course. You always smile, but inside you scream. You can't show weakness. You can't show hurt. A queen must never be seen crying unless it's at a funeral. Even then, only 3 perfect tears are allowed. When you finally conceive, it's as if the entire castle exhales. Bells ring, servants run through the halls with trays of fruit and honeyed cakes. The court rejoices, but not for you, for what you carry. Your body becomes a vessel, a state treasure. Guards are posted outside your chamber day and night. Your meals are tested. Your urine is examined. Midwives become your shadows. And still, everyone prays it's a boy. Because if it's not a boy, your worth, however briefly acknowledged, plummets. The birth itself is not an event of privacy, but a performance. Queens gave birth in full view of attendants. You lie on a carved birthing bed, while a dozen eyes watch your every wince. You're told not to scream, or if you must do it gracefully. Pain is seen as weakness, and you are not allowed weakness. The child arrives. Maybe it's a girl. Maybe it's not breathing. Maybe you are torn, bleeding, drifting. But there's no time for grief or rest. A nurse whisks the baby away. You're congratulated or consoled, and you are expected to appear in public within days. Smiling, serene, queenly. Time passes in ceremonies, feast after feast, tournaments to distract the masses. You wave from balconies and sight through hours of Latin Mass. You bless bread-kiss relics and offer your hand to peasants who avert their eyes. You are worshipped, but never touched with warmth. And when politics rise again, when enemies stir or allies grow distant, you are reminded that your body is still in play. Perhaps you are sent on a journey to smooth tensions. A visit, they call it. But you know the truth. You are bait. You are proof of peace. And if anything happens to you out there, if your carriage is attacked, if your horse bolts, if your ship sinks, they will mourn you with lovely songs and promptly replace you. You start to understand your role not as a person, but a concept, a brand, the queen. Capital Q. You exist to be admired, to be feared, to be speculated about, but never truly known. In your rare moments alone, you find peace in strange places. The flicker of candlelight on stone, the quiet rustle of silk slippers, the comforting weight of a lapdog curled at your feet. Maybe a harpist plays your favorite song, and for a few fleeting seconds, you remember what it feels like to just be. But the door always knocks. Duty never sleeps. You sit up, fix your hair, reapply the mask, because queens don't rest. They endure. There's a secret rhythm to surviving court life, and you learn it the hard way. Every palace has its own tempo, its own pattern of noise and silence, of footsteps in hallways and secrets that travel faster than whispers. You begin to map it like a song. Who visits whose chamber at night? Which servant lingers too long at your door? Who forgets your title when they think no one is listening? You listen. Always. Because in this world, knowledge isn't just power, it's protection. And queens without protection end up in towers. Or worse, remembered only in footnotes. You've read those histories. She took ill. She fell from grace. She was never quite right after the miscarriage. No details. No justice. Just absence written politely. And you start to see how your role is shaped by fear, not just your own, but everyone else's. The nobles fear irrelevance. The priests fear heresy. The knights fear failure. And you fear becoming invisible. Not to the court, but to yourself. You used to be a person. Now you're a mirror. People look at you and see what they need. A saint. A seductress. A symbol. Never simply a woman. You learn to entertain dignitaries without ever saying anything real. You smile, tilt your head, sip your wine slowly. You speak in riddles when asked about war or treaties. They call it wisdom, but really it's survival. Because saying the wrong thing, even a word out of place, can lead to heads on pikes. Maybe not yours, but someone's. And if you ever slip, if you ever scream in frustration or drop the mask in public, there's always someone watching. Chroniclers, scribes, spies. Every outburst is recorded, twisted, embellished. Your rage becomes hysteria. Your silence becomes coldness. Your tears become a national concern. Eventually, you become fluent in performance. You wear sorrow like a necklace at funerals. You show joy through choreographed laughter. You master the subtle nods, the half curtsies, the smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. Your body aches from posture. Your cheeks burn from holding the same expression for hours. And yet, it works. They believe you, or at least they accept the illusion, and that's enough. For now. Then comes the diplomatic shuffle, the parade of suitors for your daughters, or the endless guessing game over who your sons should wed. Each union is a transaction. Each decision a political gamble. You are expected to guide these choices, but never question them. What's best for the realm, they say. Always the realm. Never the child. Never the mother. Never you. You remember the day your eldest daughter was promised to a man twice her age. You watched her cry in the garden, her small fingers gripping the stems of roses until her palms bled. You wanted to hold her, tell her she was more than this bargain. But you didn't. You couldn't. Because once you were that girl, and your mother said nothing too. So instead, you held her hand at the ceremony and smiled through your own broken heart. And as she rode away, you stood on the castle steps, stone-faced and silent until the last banner vanished from sight. That night, you didn't sleep, not because of sorrow, but because you feared she'd learn too soon that you were right. that this life offers no mercy even to its most prized women. Eventually, war finds its way to your door. It always does. Maybe it's a neighboring kingdom. Maybe it's a rebellion from within, but the banners are raised, and the men march, and the castle becomes a fortress. You are told to stay inside, to pray, to smile during public addresses, to weep at the right moments when losses are announced. You're also told not to worry, but of course you do, because war means risk, and risk means change, and queens do not survive change unless they help shape it. So you meet in secret with your chancellor. You write careful letters to allies. You send coded messages through embroidery, through song lyrics, through the flowers chosen for the banquet. Lavender for loyalty, sage for strength, rue for sorrow. You never hold a sword, but make no mistake you fight. And sometimes you lose. A son, perhaps. A cousin. A city. The cost of empire is always blood, but it's not always visible. Because while the battlefield is covered in bodies, your chambers are covered in ghosts. You light candles for the dead, whisper their names in Latin, keep locks of hair in jeweled boxes. You say you're fine, that you're strong, that the crown feels no grief. But late at night, you stare at your reflection in the basin water, and you see it. The hollowness. The bruises not from blows, but from duty. No one tells you this part of queenship, that your body will betray you, that your back will ache from ceremonial gowns, that your hands will blister from too tight rings, that your smile will eventually fossilize into something permanent, something no longer yours. You try to remember who you were before the titles, before the thrones, before the masks. But she's fading. The girl who once hummed lullabies to herself, who once ran barefoot through gardens, who once believed that queens were magic. Now the only magic you know is disappearing, quietly, elegantly, without a trace. And even in your finest moments draped in gold, toasted by lords and ladies, praised by foreign scribes, you still feel the weight of it. The truth, that all of this is borrowed. The crown, the power, the reverence. It was never yours. You were only ever allowed to wear it, until they decide otherwise. It's strange how the silence becomes its own kind of noise. You begin to notice it in the in-between spaces, between the footsteps of your handmaidens, between the rustle of parchment, between the long pauses during council meetings, where your name is not spoken, but always implied. And that silence, it's sharp, because now the king is sick, not in the dramatic fall-to-the-floor kind of way, but the slow kind, the creeping kind, the kind that enters a man in winter and refuses to leave come spring. And with every day he stays abed, every time the court physician emerges with that unreadable look, the pressure on you tightens. If he dies, you lose everything. No matter how long you've ruled beside him, you are not the heir. You are not the kingdom. You are the dowager in waiting. And the vultures have already started circling. Nobles positioning themselves. Whispered conversations you're not invited to. Foreign envoys sending feelers, testing waters, calculating dowries. And the worst part, you're expected to be gracious about it, to care for your husband like a devoted wife, to oversee the prayers, the fasting, the lighting of endless candles. And yes, you do all of it. But you're also preparing. Because if you don't, you won't just be forgotten, you'll be removed. So you write to your father's old allies. You renew ties with distant cousins who once sought your favor. You redistribute gifts among your household, ensuring their loyalty. You invite the scribes and musicians who flatter your name. You commission a new portrait, one that shows you not as wife, but as matriarch. You control the narrative. Because if you let someone else write your story, they will end it with a funeral. You watch the king breathe in his sleep. The man who once terrified you, then bored you, then became something like a familiar scar. You don't love him, not in the storybook way, but you know him better than anyone. And that knowing, it's a kind of intimacy all its own. You close your eyes, and for a fleeting second, you wonder what your life would have been if you'd never worn the crown. Would you have grown old in a countryside manor, married a merchant's son, raised chickens, and sung lullabies without thinking of succession? But there's no point imagining it. That girl is gone. The king survives the winter, but only barely. And with him confined to his chambers, you become the visible monarch. People come to you now, for favors, for judgments, for guidance. And the line between wife and ruler blurs dangerously, because some love you for it, and some hate you for it. The men on the council begin speaking more slowly when you enter the room. They explain things twice. They preface their disagreement with condescension, your grace with respect. But you've sharpened your mind on the whetstone of their doubt. You know their games. You've studied their egos. You let them talk, and then you correct them with soft words and iron facts. And when they look at you in surprise, you don't gloat. You smile. Because power isn't always taken. Sometimes it's revealed. And yet, just as you begin to think you might finally wield real control, a new problem arrives. The heir. Your son, or worse, your stepson, is of age now. He's bold, handsome, reckless. He speaks too much and listens too little. He walks like the throne is already beneath him. And he sees you not as a mother, but as a hurdle. At first it's subtle. He contradicts you in public, laughs when you make serious points, rewrites your policies under the guise of modernization. Then it becomes direct. He calls you old-fashioned, out of touch, a relic. And people listen, because the court always favors the rising sun. You start hearing new terms whispered in corridors: transition, regency, retirement. You are 42. They speak of you like you're 80. You try to reason with him, invite him to your chambers for supper, remind him of nights you soothed his fevers, mornings you braided his hair when his wet nurse ran late. But he doesn't remember, or he pretends not to. He is the future, and you're the past. One day you receive word that a chronicler once loyal to your name has begun rewriting sections of the royal annals. Your contributions are being minimized. Your signature removed from key treaties. It's subtle. Just enough to change how history will remember you. You summon him, ask politely, smile tightly. But his reply chills you. I only write what the crown commands, your grace. And for the first time in years, you feel fear in your throat. Not the sharp kind, the sinking kind. You realize you are being erased, piece by piece. You start hiding copies of documents, paying scribes to transcribe your speeches, writing letters to distant abbeys asking them to preserve your version of events. Because if no one tells your story, it will vanish. And the women who come after you, they'll never know. They'll sit on these same velvet thrones, wear these same cursed crowns, smile with those same exhausted lips, and they'll think they're alone in it. Unless you leave breadcrumbs. So you do, not loudly, quietly, in the margins of cookbooks, the bindings of prayer journals. You hide truths in tapestries, in lullabies, in embroidery patterns passed down through the years. A stitch for sorrow, a symbol for endurance, a flower for fury. Because queens may not write history, but they can whisper into it. And centuries from now, when another girl sits in this same chair and wonders if she's the first to feel trapped behind gold-trimmed curtains, maybe she'll find one of your secrets. And no, she was never alone. The castle grows colder with each passing year, not in temperature, but in temperament. You begin to sense it in the air, in the way people speak to you, with that careful tone, as if you've become porcelain, fragile, replaceable. The respect is still there, but it feels rehearsed, mechanical. They bow because they must not, because they believe anymore. Your chambermaids exchange glances behind your back. Your steward hesitates before delivering news. The court jester no longer makes eye contact. You've become a symbol they don't know what to do with. Too powerful to dismiss, too inconvenient to revere. You are now the queen who once was. And it's during this period, this soft unmaking, that the memories come more often. Not in bursts, but in slow drips. You remember the girl you were. Not just the one your mother raised, but the one before all the titles. The one who loved rainstorms and scribbled poems in the margins of books. The one who used to believe people were good until proven otherwise. That girl is buried somewhere beneath silk and duty. But late at night, when the fire crackles and the palace sleeps, she resurfaces. And she's tired. You run your fingers over old letters, ink-faded corners worn soft. Some are from your childhood. Some from old friends who've long since died. One from your younger sister speaks of a festival she attended back home. Lanterns and dancing and sweet almond cakes. You'd almost forgotten what joy without purpose felt like. It makes you weep. Quietly, of course. Because queens don't cry, unless no one is watching. And then one day, your son, the new king, announces a grand festival in your honor. Your name is carved into banners. Your crest is woven in gold and crimson. There are musicians, jesters, dancers from foreign lands. You're placed on a dais above the crowd, dressed in layers of ceremonial fabric that itch and pinch beneath your arms. Everyone cheers, but it feels like a funeral, because they are not celebrating you. They're celebrating what you represent: longevity, symbolism, the past. You smile. You wave. You nod to ambassadors and murmur kind things to bored duchesses. But inside you are crumbling. Later that night after the banquet, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirror. The woman who stares back is regal, composed. Her crown sits straight. Her posture is perfect. But her eyes, your eyes, are distant, glassy. You take the crown off. It leaves a dent. You wonder if it will ever fade. Then there's the matter of religion. You've always known it was both sanctuary and sword. You paid for churches, funded monasteries. You kissed the rings of bishops and prayed with your hands clasped so tight your knuckles cracked. But as you grow older, the priests grow bolder. They begin asking questions about your role, about your choices, about your silence during past conflicts. One even suggests you retire fully to a convent. to devote your remaining years to God. You smile politely, thank him for his counsel. Then you have him reassigned to a parish far from the capital. You are still queen after all. But the suggestion lingers, and one sleepless night you imagine it a small stone cell, a garden with lavender, the sound of bells marking time instead of courtiers. No jewels, no court, no mirrors. Just quiet. The idea tempts you, not because you long for holiness, but because you long for peace. But you know better. Even if you left, they wouldn't leave you. They'd write your story for you, twist your silence into madness, your retreat into disgrace. So you stay. You host smaller feasts now, simpler clothes, fewer jewels. You walk the gardens alone, nodding at passing knights, ignoring the whispers of ladies who wear your old colors. One day, a young noblewoman stops you. She's barely 16. Her dress is too tight, her eyes too wide. She curtsies, stammering something about admiring you, wanting to be just like you. You almost laugh. But instead, you ask her one question. Do you know what it costs? She blinks, smiles nervously, doesn't understand. You don't explain. Because some truths must be lived to be believed. Later in your private chamber, you unlock a drawer. Inside is a bundle wrapped in faded silk, your first coronation robe. It smells of cedar and dust. You unfold it slowly, your hands tracing the stitching. It's lighter than you remembered. Or maybe you've just grown stronger. You sit with it for a while. Not crying, not smiling, just remembering. Because this is the part no one tells you about queenship. You don't stop wearing the crown when it's taken off. You carry it in your spine, in your silence, in the places you never speak about, not even to yourself. And sometimes in the dead of night, when the palace is silent and the wind howls like wolves across the hills, you feel the ghosts of other queens. They don't speak. They don't smile. They just stand beside you. And for once, you are not alone. The years turn over like parchment pages, quietly, without ceremony. You've outlived the king. His death was drawn out and solemn, wrapped in incense and priests muttering half-remembered Latin over his breathless chest. The halls smelled of frankincense and mildew for weeks. Nobles paraded grief like fine jewelry. Black veils were worn. Bells tolled endlessly, as if the sky itself were mourning. But you sat at his bedside, not weeping, not speaking, just waiting for it to end. Not because you wanted him gone, but because you knew what came next, the transformation. From queen consort to dowager, from center to shadow. A change in title, yes, but also in gaze. People now look past you, not to you, and yet in this strange new role you find a different kind of power. Not the loud, gilded kind. The quiet, unsettling kind. The kind that makes younger courtiers lower their eyes when you pass. The kind that isn't named but is felt. You become the woman everyone consults but no one quotes. The ghost in the corridor. The candle that never burns out. And you learn over time that the longer you survive, the more dangerous you become. Because now you know too much. You know who betrayed whom, who switched allegiances the night before the battle, who paid the apothecary to mix that fateful draft, who whispered lies into your son's ear about your loyalty. You've seen it all, and that makes you threatening. So they try to isolate you. Politely, of course. They suggest quieter residences, more time in the countryside. a retreat for your health, a holiday estate with a view of the river. They send you expensive blankets and baskets of dried fruit. They include you in letters, but always after the signatures. But you don't go, you stay in the palace, not because you crave relevance, but because this is your battlefield now, and you will not surrender it. So you host small dinners for old allies. You invite musicians who still remember the songs from your reign. You commission tapestries that depict your version of history, not with grandeur, but with truth. Your truth. And when foreign queens visit young and bright and nervous in their new silks, you meet with them privately. You pour the tea yourself. You tell them things their tutors never did. You teach them how to read the room, how to choose words that say nothing but mean everything, how to use silence as a scalpel. You pass along your secrets not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Because someone must, and one day one of them writes to you, a letter folded into quarters sealed in soft wax, hidden among the dry roses in a courier's satchel. Your words saved me, it reads. They wanted to send me to a convent. I stayed. I'm still queen. You smile. For the first time in weeks. The palace around you changes. The walls are repainted. The portraits shuffled. Statues of new monarchs appear where your husbands once stood. But they don't remove yours. They just move it slightly left, slightly dimmer lighting, out of the direct line of sight. Still there. Just less. And you begin to wonder, is this what immortality feels like? Not grand monuments, but persistent presence. Not being remembered well, but being remembered at all. You take up embroidery again. Not the ceremonial kind, but the real kind. Birds, trees, names in thread. You stitch in solitude, your fingers moving without thought. Sometimes you add hidden messages, symbols only a trained eye would see. A crow for betrayal. A rose with thorns facing upward. A serpent curled around a scepter. You hang them in the guest chambers, in libraries, in places no one expects to find truth. It's a game, a legacy, a warning. And then slowly your body begins to fail. Not dramatically, quietly. Your knees ache on cold mornings. Your hands tremble when pouring tea. You forget the names of minor nobles. Your vision blurs at dusk. The heavy gowns you once wore with pride now feel like armor you can't lift. But your mind, it's sharper than ever. Sharper than the knives they once feared you might use. And one night during a winter storm, as the wind howls down the corridors and the fireplace roars in protest, you sit alone with your thoughts. No visitors, no scribes, just you and the silence. And you realize something terrifying. No one left remembers the girl you were. Not even you. You remember events, moments, dialogues, but not her. What did she hope for? What did she dream about? Did she want to be queen? Did she want anything at all? You search the room for proof of her, something untouched by title or duty. But everything is stained with queenship, even your reflection. And yet, there's a kind of peace in that. Because while her face may be forgotten, her strength is not. You are here, still standing. Still dangerous, still queen, even if the crown now gathers dust in a glass case down the hall. Winter deepens. The kind of winter that settles not just on rooftops, but in bones. The palace, with all its tapestries and braziers, cannot quite keep the cold out anymore. The floors are slick with drafts. The servants speak in hushed tones as if even sound could shatter the brittle air. You move slower now, every step measured not for grace but for safety. You catch yourself gripping the banister with the same hands that once waved to thousands from castle balconies. And every time your fingers tremble, you hide them in your sleeves. Because even now, even after all these years, you refuse to let them see you falter. A queen does not age. She endures. Or so the myth goes. But myths are only useful until they begin to fray. And you begin to see the fraying in yourself. You forget small things first. A name, a day of the week, then its faces. Oh, which daughter-in-law gave you the embroidered slippers? Who was it that read poetry aloud by the fire last autumn? It unnerves you, but only for a while. Because eventually you learn to stop grasping. You stop pretending that memory is a vault and begin treating it as a garden. Some flowers bloom longer. Others vanish with the season. That doesn't mean they never grew. It just means their time passed. You spend more time in your private library. Books you never had time to read when life was ceremony and obligation. You run your hand over the spines, the vellum, the places where the ink has begun to fade. It comforts you. There's something sacred in worn pages. You find a collection of letters tucked between volumes. Your own writing, addressed to no one, maybe even to yourself. In one dated 20 years ago, you wrote, "I fear I am becoming what I never understood, a woman trapped in the shell of power, guarded by people who only see what they need to see." You read it over and over and you whisper aloud, "Yes, that's exactly what I became." But not with regret, with recognition. Because the one thing no one ever taught you, what no mistress of robes or governess ever mentioned, is that being queen doesn't end. Not even when the throne is someone else's. Not even when your name fades from daily conversation. It lingers. It lingers in the way people speak to you, the way they sit straighter in your presence even when you've said nothing at all. It lingers in the way servants still bow even when they're ordered not to. It lingers in the corridors like perfume on stone. And yet, there's a loneliness in this survival. You've buried too many people. Ladies in waiting who once shared jokes behind their fans. Knights who pledged loyalty until their dying breath. One by one, the faces you loved most have disappeared into the past, and all that remains are portraits smiling, fixed, haunting. You speak to them sometimes, not because you expect answers, but because they're the only ones who remember who you used to be. One stormy evening, you receive a visit from your youngest granddaughter. She's 8, maybe 9. Bold, sharp-eyed. She runs into your chamber without bowing, throws herself into your lap with a freedom that no adult has shown you in years. "I'm going to be queen someday," she declares with a kind of breathless certainty. Just like you. You don't correct her. Instead, you stroke her hair and ask softly, "Do you know what that means?" She shrugs. It means wearing the crown, and making rules, and dancing in the big hall. You nod. "Yes, sometimes." And then you say nothing more. Because this isn't the moment for sorrow. Let her dream. Let her believe. The world will do the rest soon enough. But when she leaves, you write her a letter. You don't sign it. You don't date it. You just tuck it away where you know she'll one day find it. It says, "To the girl who believes in crowns, wear it lightly. Speak when it's dangerous. Listen when they expect you to laugh. And if the world ever tells you your power is borrowed, remind them that your silence was a choice. You are not a throne. You are the fire beneath it. You fold the letter carefully. You seal it with wax and a pressed violet. And then you close your eyes. The storm still howls beyond the stone walls. But in here the silence is warm. And for the first time in a long while, you are not afraid of the dark. Because it is yours now. Yours to sit in. Yours to rule. Yours to leave behind. Spring comes late this year. The frost clings to the windows longer than usual, and the crocuses are hesitant, their purple tips peeking through the soil like spies unsure of their welcome. But eventually, the thaw arrives, and with it, a strange sensation you haven't felt in years' lightness. Not joy, not quite, but something adjacent. You wake one morning to the sound of bells, real bells, not death knells or war drums, but celebration. Your great-grandson has been born. There is laughter in the halls and music, and the scent of baked pears and fresh herbs. You sit by the window wrapped in a wool shawl and listen. The same corridors that once trembled at your footfall now echo with new life. Children you barely know run through them now, tripping on the same stones you once glided across. And it doesn't hurt as much as you thought it would. You expected resentment, longed for it maybe. But what you feel is something quieter, something softer, relief, because the story no longer belongs to you. And that's not a tragedy, it's a mercy. You remember what it was like to be the center, to have every gaze, every expectation, every judgment tied to your name. You remember what it cost. And now, with no weight upon your head, you feel for the first time in decades like a woman again. Not a symbol, not a strategy, not a statue in velvet, just a woman. You begin to take walks in the garden again, short ones leaning on the arm of a maid whose name you keep forgetting. She's kind. She doesn't correct you. She lets you pause under the old chestnut tree where the wind makes the leaves whisper like old friends. You tell her about the time the king tripped over his own sword during a parade and insisted it was intentional. She laughs, and you laugh too. It feels unfamiliar. Your mouth wasn't used to laughter anymore. But there it is. Still in you, you visit the chapel less now. Not because you've lost faith, but because your faith has changed. The saints you once prayed to in desperation now feel like companions rather than masters. You don't beg them for miracles. You just talk, quietly, like writing letters into the sky. You say things like, "I tried," or "Was I ever enough?" or "Please let her be braver than I was." No one answers. But somehow it's enough. You start noticing small things again. The way candle wax pools like melting petals. The way doves coo in the rafters during long meetings. The warmth of bread fresh from the oven. These details used to pass you by, obscured by politics and duty. But now they shine. You wonder if that's what freedom is, not grand gestures or open fields, but being able to notice again. To feel the wind and not think of war. To hear music and not wonder who it flatters. To sit and simply be. One afternoon, you visit the Hall of Portraits. It's nearly empty, the light slanting in golden ribbons through the windows. Dust hangs like snow in the air. There you are on the wall, young, painted too beautifully to be honest. Your neck swan-like, your hands serene, your eyes unreadable. A queen in the prime of her power. You tilt your head and whisper to the portrait. You had no idea, did you? She does not answer. But if she could, you think she might say, I thought I'd win. And maybe she did. In her way, you walk the hall slowly, pausing before the newer paintings. Your children, their spouses, a grandson who died too young, a daughter whose marriage became legend. Some smiles are stiff, others sincere. All of them carry pieces of you. That's when it hits you. You never needed a legacy in stone or ink. You left yourself in blood. In stories passed from nurse to nurse, from mother to daughter. In the patterns of lullabies. In the shift of a voice that dares to speak when silenced. In the shape of a hand that refuses to tremble. You were not erased. You were woven in. And on days when the pain in your joints swells like storm tides, when your body reminds you of its mortality, you think of that. You sit by the fire, a warm shawl over your shoulders, and close your eyes. The room smells of old wood and lavender. Someone is singing in the corridor badly, but with heart. You smile. And you think maybe being queen wasn't the curse. Maybe surviving it was the miracle. Because now, at the edge of dusk, you are more than you ever were in the spotlight. You are the echo, the ember. The whisper passed from woman to woman down the corridors of time. And you are not afraid to fade. Not anymore. Because you know now that queens never truly vanish. They just change shape. The older you grow, the more the castle shrinks. Not physically, of course. The corridors are still long. The ceilings still impossibly high. The great hall still swallows sound, the way it always has. But somehow, everything feels smaller now. Quieter, more hollow. The people you once feared or adored are either gone or changed beyond recognition. Those who once bowed too deeply now walk past with distracted nods. The halls echo differently now, not with the clamor of court intrigue, but with something closer to memory. You pass tapestries you once commissioned, scenes of victory, romance, devotion. The faces are idealized, flawless, and serene the way art prefers its subjects. But you remember the real stories behind them. The battles won only after unbearable loss. The marriages arranged through gritted teeth. The loyalty bought at great cost. None of that shows in the thread. And you realize truth does not live in monuments. It lives in the eyes of those who were there. And most of those eyes are closed now. You begin to write again. Not edicts or correspondence, but thoughts, fragments, words without audience. You keep the pages tucked in a book no one reads anymore. The Book of Hours, ironically, a devotional meant to bring comfort, now a disguise for your truest voice. You write things like, my crown was forged from silence. The nights were longest when no one knew I was grieving. Love is not a luxury here. It is a risk. You don't expect anyone to find these notes, but still you write them. Because sometimes even queens need to speak without performance. You find solace in unexpected places. The way your maid hums while brushing your hair. The warmth of a robe that smells faintly of cedar and rose oil. The rare days when sunlight touches the eastern windows just right, turning the stone floor golden. It's in these small details you feel most alive. Not during ceremonies, not at grand banquets, but here, in the quiet. And it's during one of these moments that a strange thought visits you. What if all the things they told you mattered? Didn't? What if the real triumph wasn't surviving court politics or birthing heirs or mastering diplomacy? What if the real triumph was simply being still after everything, still present, still breathing, still capable of tenderness? It frightens you a little. Because if that's true, then most of your life was spent chasing shadows. But it also comforts you. Because it means this moment, this simple, uneventful moment, is more powerful than all your coronations combined. You spend more time with the servants now, not for gossip, not to pry, but because their honesty soothes you. They don't care who you used to be. They care if you're warm enough, if your tea is too bitter, if you slept through the night. You begin to see them differently. The cook who always oversalted your broth. She sings lullabies when she thinks no one's listening. The stable boy who once dropped your riding boots. He writes poems to a girl in town. Even the guard who never speaks, you learn he lost a sister to fever and keeps her comb in his pocket. These people are not footnotes. They are not background. They are the soul of this place. And you, once convinced of your superiority, now understand you were always just another piece on the board. Important, yes, but not singular. One morning, as spring rain taps gently on the window panes, you ask your handmaid to bring you your old coronation crown. She hesitates. Why, Your Grace, you smile. Because I want to look at it. And when it's brought to you still gleaming, still absurdly heavy, you don't put it on. You place it on the table beside you and simply watch it for a long while. The gems catch the light. The filigree still perfect. It hasn't changed. But you have. You used to believe it defined you, that it gave you purpose, direction, meaning. But now you see it for what it truly is, a beautiful cage. You whisper to it not out of madness, but out of clarity. I carried you longer than I carried any child. You cost me more than any war. And still they'll remember you more than they remember me. It doesn't answer, of course, but something in you loosens, and in that loosening, you feel peace. Because the crown may sit in glass for future queens to gawk at. But you've moved beyond it. You've found something no metal can hold, a quiet, relentless resilience, the kind that does not shine, the kind that endures. You wake one morning to a strange quiet, the kind that isn't empty, but expectant. A hush so complete it feels alive. No bells, no footsteps outside your chamber, no distant clatter of servants laying breakfast trays, just the steady beat of your own breath and the bird song that slips through the cracked window like a secret. You sit up slowly. Your bones complain. Your hands tremble slightly as they always do now, but you don't mind. You've grown used to the chorus of age, and yet today feels different. Not ominous, just separate, set apart from the days before it. You let your feet find the cold stone floor and wrap a shawl around your shoulders. The fabric is soft, worn thin at the edges, the same one your mother once gave you back when you were merely a girl with potential, not yet a queen. You think of her often now, not with sorrow, but with understanding. There are things you blamed her for in your youth, her silence, her stiffness, her distance. But now you see it for what it was, protection. She didn't prepare you for power. She prepared you to survive it. And she succeeded. That's something no one ever acknowledges in court survival, is its own kind of brilliance. You pass the mirror, as you always do. And as always, you glance, but not long. Mirrors lie. They show only the surface, the white in your hair, the softened jawline, the faded irises. They don't show the girl who endured. They don't show the strategies, the sacrifices, the days you bit your tongue until it bled. They don't show the nights you stayed awake through war, through childbirth, through rumors that could kill. They don't show the pages you burned to protect others, the letters you never sent, the words you swallowed. And so instead of stopping at the mirror, you pass by it with dignity, because you no longer seek confirmation. You know who you are. At breakfast you eat little, just warm bread and goat's cheese washed down with mint tea. You take each bite slowly, as though time itself has slowed to match your pace. No one rushes you anymore, and you've long since stopped rushing yourself. You glance out the window and see the courtyard blooming, tulips and daffodils, the lilacs just beginning to stir. You remember when you once commanded entire armies and couldn't name a single flower. Now you can. And that too feels like power. A knock at your door. It's your lady-in-waiting, the same girl-well-woman now who came to your service just after her own mother passed. She bows out of habit. There's a request for your presence, she says gently. From the Queen. You smile at the word. The Queen. Not you, not anymore. She's young, barely 30. Clever, ambitious, a touch impetuous. You see yourself in her sometimes, especially when she thinks no one is watching. She wants advice, your lady adds, as if you couldn't have guessed. You nod. Of course. You dress slowly. Not in court finery, just a modest gown in deep blue, the color of twilight. You pin your hair back. Apply a hint of balm to your lips. Slip a ring on each hand, not for vanity, but for remembrance. Each was a gift. Each carries a story. You walk through the palace halls as if in a dream. Servants step aside. Guards bow low. Children peek from behind doors and whisper. You do not mind. You've become legend now. You can feel it in the air. You reach the Queen's solar, and she greets you with a curtsy too deep for comfort. You wave it off, no need for that, you say gently. She laughs, sheepish. Old habits. She offers you a seat by the fire. The room smells of ink and wax and fresh roses. A desk is covered in letters. There's a map of the eastern provinces pinned above the hearth, peppered with tiny red marks. She talks. About trade disputes, about rebellious dukes, about whether to marry off her youngest daughter to the northern prince or wait for a better offer. You listen. You nod. You offer thoughts, not orders, because you've learned the greatest wisdom lies not in dictating, but in guiding. She leans forward at one point and says, "Do you ever miss it?" You raise an eyebrow. Miss what? The power. You smile soft and steady. I never had it. Not really. What I had was the illusion of control. What I have now is perspective. She frowns, confused, but she'll understand. One day, when the visit ends, she hugs you, a small, impulsive thing. You freeze for a second, then pat her back. Her embrace smells of rosewater and ambition. You return to your chambers as the sun begins to dip. The hallways are bathed in amber light. The castle groans gently in the breeze like an old beast settling down. You sit by the window. The crown still sits in its glass case across the room, untouched, undisturbed, but always present. And you think maybe this is the closest you've ever been to freedom. Not because you stepped away from the throne, but because you stopped needing it. It's strange, isn't it, how you can live a life entirely surrounded by people and still feel invisible. Even now in your twilight years, you are rarely alone. There's always someone lighting candles, sweeping ash from the hearth, refilling tea, adjusting the folds of your robe with reverent fingers. You're attended to like a relic, but rarely seen. You've become part of the palace now, as permanent as the columns, as quietly observed as the weathered statues in the chapel. A presence, a symbol, a warning. You think about the girls you used to be surrounded by, the ladies in waiting who giggled behind fans, who braided your hair and shared gossip, who cried when their hearts were broken and hid poems in their sleeves. Most of them are gone now, married, buried, forgotten. Sometimes you try to summon their faces. You close your eyes, let the crackle of fire lull your mind, and dig backward through the decades. Some return vividly, others blur. But all of them come wearing the same expression, hope. They thought being close to you meant safety. They learned better. You tried to shield them, you really did. But queenship is a fortress built on sacrifice, and sometimes the drawbridge closes before you realize who's still outside. One of your oldest friends, Isolde. She was your voice when yours faltered, your strength when yours failed. She once pulled you from bed after your second miscarriage and whispered, "You don't get to break not today." She's gone now, not dramatically, just quietly. One winter she stopped writing. The next her name stopped appearing in conversation. When you asked, someone said simply, her heart gave out. You didn't cry, not because you weren't grieving, but because grief had become so familiar it no longer startled you. It just folded itself into your breath. These days your companions are different. A mute kitchen girl with kind eyes who brings you pastries shaped like flowers. A gray cat who comes and goes as it pleases, curling at your feet like a living shadow. An old nursemaid, long since retired, who visits once a week to rub lavender oil into your joints and tell you about her grandchildren. None of them care who you were. They only care who you are now. And somehow that's more comforting than the flattery of noble women or the deference of foreign emissaries. Because now you understand something that once terrified you. Titles fade. No one bows to the woman who taught the prince how to read. No one sings songs about the queen who remembered her servants' birthdays. But those are the things that last. Not in stories, in people. You think of your children, those who survived, those who didn't. Each one marked you in ways only your body remembers now. Stretched lines beneath your gown, scars hidden beneath velvet, echoes of lullabies you haven't sung in years. You used to believe they were your greatest duty. Now you know they were your greatest rebellion. Because in a world that saw you as a pawn, you dared to love, fiercely, quietly, without apology. And even when they disappointed you, even when they grew cold or distant, or tried to outmaneuver you, you never stopped hoping. You still do. You've been writing again. Not just thoughts this time, but truths. Pages of them. Each line a shard of memory, a lesson forged in fire. You call it a record, but it's more like a gift. You hide it in a wooden box beneath your bed. Not locked, just tucked away. If someone finds it after you're gone, you hope they read it slowly, carefully, and maybe, just maybe, they'll feel less alone. Today you watched a coronation rehearsal from a balcony. The new queen, not your daughter, but your son's wife, struggled to walk in the ceremonial gown. She tripped twice. No one laughed. But you could feel the tension tighten around her like laces on a corset. You remember that feeling, the weight of expectation, the impossibility of grace. And when she looked up, her eyes met yours. Just for a second. You nodded. Slight. Steady. And she nodded back. A silent exchange. A passing of understanding. Because she doesn't need your words. Not yet. She needs your gaze. She needs to know someone survived it. Someone made it to the other side. And as you sit by the fire that evening, pen in hand, cat at your feet, you write a single sentence in your book of truths. If she learns to wear the crown, without losing her voice, she'll be stronger than I ever was. You close the book, press it flat, and for the first time in days, you sleep through the night. Not because your worries are gone, but because you know someone else has picked them up. And this time they might not carry them alone. The morning arrives with no fanfare, no servants bearing news, no bells marking the hour, just the soft scrape of wind against the shutters and the distant caw of crows in the courtyard. You stretch slow and careful. Your limbs complain. Your joints, traitorous as ever, ache in protest. But you're used to this by now. You know how to move without rushing, how to breathe past the stiffness. You rise. There is no rush. There hasn't been in years. Your time is no longer dictated by councils or courtly obligations. You have become something else now, part symbol, part silence, all presence. And that's what unnerves them most. You aren't gone. You've simply stopped asking for permission to exist. That kind of quietness is dangerous in a woman, especially one who remembers everything. Today you feel an urge to walk the old wing, the place where you lived as a young queen back when you still believed diplomacy could be learned from books and justice could be secured with the right number of signatures. The corridors are faded now, rugs threadbare, paintings cracked and dulled by time. The air smells of forgotten perfume and damp wood. But you remember. You remember pacing here barefoot, your heart racing after a fight with the king. You remember hiding letters in the third drawer of the fourth door on the right, notes from your sister, poems from a court bard who dared too much. You remember losing your first child in that chamber and bleeding alone on the cold stone while the priest recited psalms with eyes averted. You remember everything, and yet you do not weep. You simply place your palm against the wall, let the coolness seep into your skin, and whisper, "Still here." It is not a declaration. It is a promise. The castle feels different when you walk it alone. It's no longer imposing, no longer a beast to be tamed. It feels like an extension of yourself. Every creak of wood, every echo, every shadow. This was your world. You made it what it was by surviving, by shaping, by refusing to be broken. You find yourself outside the room where they crowned you. The heavy wooden doors are still scarred from the heels of a nervous horse brought in during a ceremonial misstep decades ago. You push them open. Inside, dust floats like golden ash in the morning light. The platform where you stood that day is still there. So is the chandelier that nearly collapsed during your husband's coronation. You walk to the center, stand still, look up. And for a moment, you remember how heavy the crown felt. How the weight pressed into your brow, not just metal, but responsibility, expectation, and the silent scream of every woman who'd come before you. You lower yourself slowly to the stone. Sit with your hands resting on your lap. Breathe. Not as queen, not even as dowager, just as you. And in that stillness, you ask yourself the question no one's dared to ask you in years. Were you happy? Not always. Rarely. But that's not the point, is it? The point was never happiness. It was endurance. Grace. Dignity. Wisdom gained in quiet moments between disasters. You've long since let go of the idea that joy must be constant to be real. You've learned to find it in fragments, in the softness of wool against your skin, in the sweetness of preserved apricots, in the way a page turns gently beneath your fingertips, and those fragments over time have become enough. Later that day, your lady-in-waiting finds you still sitting there. She doesn't scold, doesn't rush. She simply extends a hand and says, "Tea's getting cold." You take it. And as you rise, you leave behind nothing, not a legacy of grandeur, not a memory etched in gold, just a quiet imprint in the dust. A shape, a shadow, a presence. Proof you were there, that you bore the weight, that you made it. You return to your chamber, and before you rest, you take out your book of truths and write one final line for the day. History will forget my face, but I stitched myself into its hem. You close the book, and for the first time you feel not like a queen remembering her reign, but like a woman remembering her life. The rain returns the next morning, not as a storm, but as a gentle, ceaseless drizzle. The kind that blurs the landscape into watercolors and softens the sounds of the world. You sit by the window in your woolen shawl, a cup of spiced tea warming your hands, and watch it all unfold: the gray sky, the wet cobblestones, the garden's bowed daffodils. Everything slows, even time itself. You've grown to love this kind of weather. When you were younger, it irritated you. Rain meant wet hems, canceled hunts, damp scrolls, and dreary court moods. But now rain means reprieve. It keeps people indoors, keeps them quiet. It gives you hours untouched by ceremony or schedule, a kind of hush you once had to claw for. Now it's given freely. The cat hops onto your lap, curling its damp paws beneath itself, as if it belongs there, which by now it does. You stroke it absent-mindedly as your thoughts drift backward mostly. You think of the war that never came, the one you feared for years, whispers from the north, tense treaties, noblemen who sharpened words like knives. You spent nights bracing for it, drafting fallback plans, practicing speeches of resilience. And yet it passed, never ignited. It's funny, the things that haunted you most rarely happened. It was the small things that left marks. The accidental betrayal of a friend too afraid to side with you. The cruel joke your husband told at your expense in front of foreign guests. The moment your own child looked at you, not with love, but calculation. These things never made the records, but they made you. You sip your tea and think of how many times you wanted to leave. Not the palace yourself, your life, your title. There were days when the weight of it all pressed so tightly around your chest you could barely breathe. But something kept you there. Duty, maybe. Pride, certainly. But deeper still, a whisper inside you that said, "Tao, witness, endure. They cannot erase you if you remain." And so you did. Not with grandeur, not with thunder, with stubborn, sacred presence. You chuckle softly to yourself now, because you remember the girl you were. The one who thought queenship meant wielding power like a sword, making declarations, changing the world. You were wrong. Power is subtler. It's knowing when to speak and when silence will echo louder. It's seeing 10 moves ahead and letting others think they won the game. It's walking into a room and commanding it with a glance, not a shout. It's surviving. And survival in this world is not weakness. It is art. You reach for your book of truths again. The pages have begun to warp slightly with age. You flip to a blank one, the pen cool in your hand. You write, "They will say I reigned quietly. Let them. I made silence a weapon. I turned stillness into steel." You pause, then add, "My throne was never in the great hall. It was in every moment I refused to break." The words settle on the page like dust. You close the book gently. There's a knock at the door. A servant, new nervous, enters with a parcel. "A gift," she says, bowing low. "From the Queen." You open it slowly. Inside is a hand-embroidered scarf, delicate, thoughtful. The pattern includes violets, your favorite flower, though you never told anyone. Or so you thought. There's a note written in a careful, youthful hand. "For the one who taught me that power does not always raise its voice." Thank you. You read it twice, then a third time. You fold the scarf. Place it in the cedar drawer beside your most treasured items. And then for the first time in weeks, you dress properly. Hair pinned, gown pressed, ring selected not for sentiment but symbolism. Because you understand what the Queen has done. She's acknowledged you not as an artifact, but as a woman who still holds weight. And in court, that is no small gesture. So you will show up, not for her, for the role, for the line of women watching from behind mirrors and tapestries, for the memory of who you once were, for the legacy of who you became. You glance at your reflection before leaving. You do not smile. You do not weep. You simply nod. And the woman in the mirror nods back. Still here, still whole, still queen. The hallway smells of beeswax and old stone as you make your way toward the chapel. The click of your shoes echoes faintly rhythmic and steady like a clock marking time in a place where time no longer rushes. You requested the space be empty today. No acolytes. No nobles whispering prayers they don't mean. Just silence. You enter alone. The stained glass windows paint the floor in color ruby, emerald, sapphire, as if the saints themselves are kneeling in light. You move past rows of carved pews and sit not at the front, but halfway back, the middle, the in-between. It feels right. You fold your hands, not in prayer exactly, but in stillness. You let your thoughts drift up into the vaulted ceiling where echoes live. You remember coming here years ago, after your husband's coronation, after your first miscarriage, after a nobleman publicly accused you of favoring your homeland over your kingdom. Each time you sat in this chapel and asked the same question. What am I supposed to do now? No answers ever came. But you kept asking. And maybe that's all faith is, in the end, a willingness to ask. Not expecting reply, not demanding miracles, just refusing to stop seeking. You close your eyes and let the silence settle over you. Not heavy, not cold, but close, like a blanket, like a friend. You realize you've grown comfortable with silence, trusted it, It never betrayed you, never changed with fashion or politics. It never took sides. Silence was the one constant in your reign, and the place where you hid your strength. After some time, minutes, hours, you're not sure you rise and light a candle for the ones who came before you, for the ones who fell, for the ones who are yet to wear the crown. The flame flickers but holds. You whisper, for her and her and her. You don't say their names aloud. Some have been scrubbed from history, others never recorded at all. But you remember them, and that's enough. Later, you return to your chambers, and the castle feels warmer than usual. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's you. There's a letter on your writing desk, sealed in pale green wax. You recognize the crest. It belongs to a neighboring queen, one you helped protect years ago, through a quiet, calculated marriage negotiation no one ever credited you for. You open the letter with care. It reads, "You were right about everything. I speak now even when they try to quiet me. I lead now even when they roll their eyes. I endure because I saw you do it first." You press the paper to your chest, not with pride, with relief. Because for all the royal decrees and court alliances and gold-stitched gowns, this is what endures. This is what matters. You made a map through the darkness, and someone followed it. You spend the afternoon writing, not in your book of truths, but in fresh parchment, letters to be sent, words you've held back too long. You write to your estranged daughter who still lives far away and hasn't visited in years. You write, "I wasn't always kind, but I was always trying. I see now where I faltered, and I hope you do too. We were both trapped in crowns, and both of us wanted to be free. Forgive me, or don't. Just know I never stopped loving you." You seal the letter, not with your crest, with her favorite flower pressed and tied in ribbon. You write others 2 smaller notes, to former servants, to the royal archivist, to the quiet knight who once risked everything to deliver a message on your behalf. You thank them, because it's time. Time to empty your heart of all the unsaid things. Time to make space. That evening, as the sun sinks behind the hills and turns the sky molten gold, you sit by the fire with the scarf gifted by the new queen draped around your shoulders. You read one of your old favorite poems, just a few stanzas written long before your reign, long before your name was ever spoken in court. You whisper the last line, "A crown may fade, but a woman's breath shapes the wind." And you believe it now, deeply, fully, because you have shaped the wind. You've whispered truths into cracks in stone. You've buried strength in tapestries and tucked warnings into lullabies. You've turned silence into legacy, and you've done it all while the world believed you were just a queen. They never saw the whole of you, but you did. And now at last, that is enough. The final stretch of your life arrives not like a thunderclap, but like dusk. Gradual, gentle, almost imperceptible until suddenly the light is gone and everything is softer, quieter, slower. You feel it first in your bones, how long it takes now to rise from peace, how stairs become mountains, how the wind presses against your chest, like a question you no longer have the breath to answer. And then you feel it in your days. Not fewer responsibilities, those vanished years ago, but fewer reasons, fewer visits, fewer questions, fewer eyes waiting to see what you'll do. You are no longer watched. You are witnessed. There is a difference. The new queen rules now, fully, firmly. You no longer sit at council meetings. You no longer sign decrees. Your name no longer appears in the official dispatches. But still they check on you. Still she sends for you when she feels uncertain. And each time you remind her of the same truth, no crown is heavy when it's worn with purpose. But every crown leaves a bruise. She listens. You think she always will. One afternoon, while walking in the gardens, escorted by a nursemaid with kind eyes and patient steps, you stop by the oldest tree in the royal grounds. A yew tree thick with secrets, its bark carved with initials centuries old. Yours are there too, faded but real. You touch them and wonder who else has stood here just like this, remembering their own younger self, now a stranger. You realize that's what memory is at the end. A long corridor of rooms you once lived in now, dusty and quiet, filled with versions of you can no longer quite reach. And yet, you still carry their echoes, all the women you've been. The girl in her first velvet dress, the trembling bride on her wedding night, the fierce mother clutching her son's hand during war, the quiet strategist behind the throne, the queen silenced by politics, but not by will. All of them still live in your skin, worn, weathered, still whole. You sit by the tree and close your eyes. The air is warm, drowsy with the scent of moss and jasmine. Somewhere in the distance, children laugh. You remember when that laughter used to be yours. You smile. And you are not sad. Not anymore. Because you've left yourself everywhere. In the words of young queens, in the folds of old gowns, in the margins of forgotten letters, in the quiet corners of the palace walls. You think of the first time you walked into this castle and how impossibly large it felt, how daunting, how cold. Now it feels like a part of you, or maybe you are a part of it. You return to your chamber that evening with help. The fire is already lit. The cat is already curled in your chair. On your writing table, the book of truths waits. You flip to the final page. Your hands do not shake today. You write, I was not born free, but I learned to breathe through the iron. I was not raised to rule, but I ruled myself. I was not remembered for greatness, but I was never forgotten. You seal the page with a pressed violet, and then you place the book in a wooden box beside your bed. You rest your hand on it, not as a queen, but as the woman who carried queenship like a flame cupped in trembling hands, never letting it go out, never letting it consume her. And when you finally lie down, the room is quiet. The windows are open. The breeze carries in the scent of lavender and rain. And somewhere deep in your chest, where fear used to live, there is only calm. Because you know now, truly, finally, you have done enough. You have been enough, and that is the most regal thing of all. The room is still now. The fire low the candle near your bed flickering against the stone walls like a heartbeat finally easing. The crown, long untouched, sits in its glass case across the room, half in shadow. And the silence, it no longer feels heavy. It feels earned. You lie in bed wrapped in soft wool and memory. The linen sheets are cool against your skin. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, an owl hoots once. Distant, soft, familiar. The kind of sound that reminds you time doesn't need your permission to move forward. The wind murmurs through the crack in the window, and you close your eyes, letting it carry you not to sleep, but to stillness. You think of the garden, the chapel, the corridors that once echoed with your footsteps and now belong to someone else. You feel no resentment, only rest. Because this story, your story, was never about glory. It was about survival. It was about choosing to remain when every part of you wanted to disappear. About turning silence into legacy and loneliness into wisdom. About watching the world change and refusing to be erased by it. You were not the loudest, not the most loved, not the one sung about in feasts. But you were there. A constant. A flame. A queen in the deepest, truest sense of the word. And now, as your breathing slows and your body sinks deeper into the comfort of twilight, you let it all go. Not in defeat, but in peace. Because being a queen in the Middle Ages wasn't glamorous. It was horrifying and brutal and real. But somehow, you survived it.